Imagine this real quick. Imagine that you have a speech coming up on orangutans. How are you going to get your message from your inner world into your audience's inner world? And by the way, there's a caveat. Your audience, they've never heard of orangutans. They've never seen orangutans. What are you going to do? Now, sure, you can use descriptive language. You can get on center stage and act like an orangutan yourself. But don't you think it would be a little bit more effective if you do those first two and then you also complement your speech further with imagery of an orangutan? Maybe you're capable of putting a video on your PowerPoint and the audience can see what an orangutan acts like, behaves like. By doing this, they are more engaged in your words. They're more engaged in you acting like a monkey. Overall, your message is translating from your inner world to their inner world. So overall, PowerPoints are just a tool. Keep that in mind. There's tons of people that often talk about, well, the phone is the problem. But look closer. Billy is using the phone to build a business, to get smarter, to network effectively, while John is using the phone to give himself panic attacks. Is it the phone that's the problem, or the user of the phones? Likewise, there are plenty of people out there that are using PowerPoints effectively in order to amplify their message. Is it the PowerPoint that's the problem? No, it's the incorrect usage of the PowerPoint. And in the next video, I'm going to be talking about what an incorrect usage of the PowerPoint is like. The incorrect way to use a PowerPoint is to just read off of it. I used to have a teacher that used to do this before. Ms. Grushoff was her name. And I just recall she would get this three-legged stool. She would drag it in front of the class. She would sit down. And for the next hour, she would just read off the slides verbatim. And I'm not gonna lie, that did a number on me. For plenty of years, I looked at PowerPoints in such a negative light because immediately it made me think of Ms. Grushoff. And if you're watching this class right now, you may have a negative stigma of PowerPoints for that same reason. Maybe you had a Ms. Grushoff in your life. Not only are people reading off slides a lot, what they're doing is they're also assuming that their audience members have supreme levels of concentration, and they also assume that their audience members loves words. You may like words, but that doesn't mean that the audience members want to read paragraphs and paragraphs on center stage. All it does is that it distracts them from you, the speaker. So a few ways to use the PowerPoint incorrectly is to assume that the audience members have a supreme level of concentration. It's actually much better if you assume they have poor concentration, because that forces you to get to the point much more effectively. And another mistake in regards to the PowerPoint is when you're just reading off of it and you're not putting in any effort as the speaker. Once again, remember, the PowerPoint is simply a tool. It is dependent on you. You are not dependent upon it. The main thing you want to understand in regards to using a PowerPoint is that you want to use it in order to amplify. So what does this mean? Let's unpack that. The first thing that you want to ask yourself is this a speech that really needs PowerPoints? In one of the public speaking clubs that I was a part of, the first ever speech that we had to give was called the icebreaker. And within this icebreaker, we had to talk about ourselves. I noticed that no one used a PowerPoint because this is not a topic that really needs a PowerPoint when you're breaking it down. You could get creative and be like, well, if this person lives in Antarctica, then you may need a PowerPoint. And that would be a great observation because that's something that's unordinary. So think like that. Anytime that you're about to start off creating a speech, you want to ask yourself the question, do I need a PowerPoint? And this is a very subjective question because it's going to depend on the topic that you're discussing. It's going to depend on you, the speaker, and it's going to depend on your audience. But simply asking that question serves as one of those safe systems that allows you to avoid spending a lot of time on the minors rather than the majors. Next, let's say you're someone that's like, yeah, I do need PowerPoints for this presentation, especially this presentation. Now, what you want to do is you want to engage this thought experiment. Hypothetically, let's say a worst case scenario does happen where there's a technical issue and the PowerPoints do not function. Am I capable of still going on with my speech? And you want to know something? The whole PowerPoints not functioning, that is a very, very common issue. Within this public speaking club that I was in, for future presentations, a lot of the speakers did require PowerPoints in their talk. And I lost count of how many times one wire was missing and the PowerPoint couldn't function. And this is when we looked at the speaker and we're like, you're still good to go, right? Yeah, I mean, you could still give your talk, right? And plenty of them, unfortunately, couldn't. Some of it was justified because they really did need their slides. But for a lot of the other speakers, they just didn't have the confidence in their talk. So that's the next thing you want to ask yourself. Can I still give the talk without the PowerPoint? Now, what this allows you to do is that this forces you to only focus on the main points whenever you're creating your talk. Because you're like, okay, now I'm already validating that I don't necessarily need the PowerPoint. I'm only using it in order to amplify my points. So if I'm only using it in order to amplify my points, it doesn't have to be too verbose. It doesn't need all these different words. Instead, how about I put stuff on the slide that I'm not just capable of doing myself? Back to the orangutan examples. I can't necessarily show exactly what an orangutan looks like, but I can put a picture of the animal on the slide. So overall, this is a very creative process, but simply asking the questions, do I need the PowerPoint? And even if the PowerPoints were to not work, can I give the speech? This simplifies your thinking, and this allows you to focus on the basics, especially when you're designing your slides.